Yes, there are many technical advances, but basically the thing that gives us more depth is the ability to draw the way it should be drawn for this medium. You get a lot of depth out of the way you shape a line, the way you draw the figures. That contributes an awful lot to the depth and to the overall effect that you see today.
To understand why Sleeping Beauty is such an artistic achievement, one must first understand how difficult a medium traditional hand-drawn animation was in the first place. Everything was done by hand, frame by excruciating frame. Each character was drawn by hand, for each frame, sometimes over a dozen times per second of film, depending on the fluidity one desired from the character. This meant that not only did artists have to draw a good character, but they had to do it consistently over 50,000 times for an average 70-minute runtime. Any artist will tell you that consistency of that caliber is extremely difficult, and it takes great artistic talent to perfect this skill. And although a single animator wasn't expected to draw all 50,000 plus of his or her assigned character drawings alone, even a tenth of that amount is still an extraordinary amount of work. Therefore, when Walt told his animators to purposefully animate in a way that would make this process even more difficult than it already was, they were already raising the bar for quality in the film. Walt Disney famously wanted Sleeping Beauty to not look like a cartoon, but rather like a moving illustration, in the caliber of those found in elaborate European storybooks. As a result, he chose a more Gothic design style, inspired by Renaissance art with lots of straight lines and clearly defined detail. Straight lines are usually avoided in animation because they are incredibly difficult to draw consistently and hinder the ability to animate characters fluidly. The challenge was now to introduce subtlety of animated expressions to the design in order to make up for the lack of malleable characters. And any animator will tell you that the effort involved in such an endeavor is absolutely enormous, showcasing the pure expertise and raw artistic talent of Disney artists. In order to have a suitable reference for the film's complex characters, a very rough live-action reel was created in which actors, including voice actors like Maleficent's Eleanor Audley, would play out rough approximations of the scenes for artists to use as inspiration for the final animation. These reels were never traced. If they had been traced, the characters would have been too stiff or strange-looking. The live action was simply used as a rough reference for animators to use as a starting point when they were having trouble figuring out certain technicalities, like how a dress moved when a body turned, or how the eyes might widen in the midst of certain expressions. This study material proved invaluable as Disney's best animators attempted to portray the human figure realistically in a style that they weren't entirely familiar with. The results of pushing these stylistic boundaries showcased the rare artistic talent of Disney's animators in a way that no other film could. In particular, animators Mark Davis and Milt Kahl proved their artistic genius on Sleeping Beauty as the only animators able to draw the difficult human characters with convincing realism. As part of Walt Disney's 9 Old Men, the nickname for Walt's greatest and most experienced artists, they were already amongst the best animators in history. But Davis and Kahl took that skill even further, displaying draftsmanship especially in regard to the human figure that no other animator could accomplish. There were many other amazing animators that worked on Sleeping Beauty, and who did amazing work, but these two, for some reason, did exceptionally well with their specific characters. Milt Kahl, the animator for Philip, often complained about being stuck on animating stiff fairy tale princes. And although animating the regal princes of Disney movies was a more boring task when compared to the loose and goofy animation of slapstick characters, the truth was that no one else could do it because of how difficult it was. There was something about the way Milt drew a line, or rendered an expression, that made his human characters handsome, believable, and subtle. Milt's restraint was a rare artistic skill that many other animators lacked. But there was one at the studio whose draftsmanship did compare to Milt's, and possibly even surpassed him. Mark Davis was also typecast on animating the more subdued characters of Disney films. But unlike Milt, his specialty was the graceful female. For some reason, Mark animated the Disney princess in a way that no other animator could, and many had tried. His previous work on Cinderella herself had especially captivated Walt Disney with its grace and beauty, and many experts in animation still reference that work as being a masterclass in animating refinement into a character. Mark was given a great honor in the production of Sleeping Beauty. He was given the task of animating not only the Princess Aurora herself, but also the great villain Maleficent. Considered by many to be one of the greatest Disney villains of all time, Maleficent was animated with such dignity and refinement that even Mark was daunted by the task. In addition, there are sequences of animation on Aurora that are simply breathtaking, displaying Mark's prowess at drawing great beauty and subtlety into his characters. Needless to say, animating Sleeping Beauty was a massive artistic achievement for the Disney studio on both a technical and artistic level. But it goes even farther than that. In addition to this, every single background painting, which provided the setting, atmosphere, and tone of the story, was expertly crafted by art director Ivan Earle to contain uniform detail on an astronomical scale, a labor-intensive task hitherto unheard of. This process produced a film where every single frame was a work of art. Finally, the film experienced a limited release in the very special 70mm format for which it was made, making it one of only 2 Disney animated features at the time to be released in widescreen. This format showcased each frame on the big screen in stunning glory, and with the decision to ditch the plucky musical style of most Disney features in favor of the more sophisticated sound of an adapted Tchaikovsky's Sleeping Beauty ballet, earned the film an Oscar nomination for Best Score. Sleeping Beauty blew audiences away with the pure craftsmanship involved in its production, and was a massive box office hit, while also garnering mostly positive critical reviews. Even today, the film sits on a score of 90% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, almost 60 years after its initial release. Sleeping Beauty's release finally fulfilled Walt Disney's dream of animation being recognized as a legitimate art form. But unfortunately, this was not to last. Sleeping Beauty was unfortunately the last of its kind. Because it had such a high caliber of quality, the film was insanely expensive to make. So much so that even though it eventually earned enough to place it at number 34 of the highest grossing films of all time, adjusted for inflation, it only barely made enough to turn a profit. It was getting far too expensive to continue to raise the bar for each new film that Disney made. He simply just wasn't making enough money to keep on making the next film better than the last. And the process was beginning to make the company lose money. So, with a heavy heart, Walt Disney stopped trying to improve upon the last film. And while he never compromised on telling a good story or making quality movies, they were never quite at the same quality that Sleeping Beauty was. And with Walt's next film being 101 Dalmatians, Sleeping Beauty marked the end of an era. This is why, even over half a century later, Sleeping Beauty is considered an unparalleled masterpiece in the history of animation, as well as one of the most important animated films ever made.